There's a fuck around and find out story, and it's kind of a doozy. And it's about a famous chef who's a co-owner of several moderate to upscale restaurants in Washington, D.C. area. And I've tagged Bootsy Sanders below. You guys need to follow him. He gives really good news and information and context, and he tells the full story about this one. But after hearing him tell the story, I went on a little rabbit hole search on this chef. So basically, Chef Matt Baker is super, super duper MAGA, but also, you know, to no surprise, a hateful one. Reposting and sharing commentary about how basically federal workers are leeches and celebrating Elon Musk's cuts and all of the horrible, hateful things about immigrants. And he failed to realize just how many Democrats frequented his restaurants. And so he's taken a huge hit. Now he blames the fact that there were recent laws passed in the DC area where you had to increase wages. Sorry, you know, I know MAGA's really against paying people a fair wage. But what's really interesting is he and other co-owners owned Gravitas, which was upscale, and Michelle's upscale, and then 2 Baker's Daughter locations. Now, he had to close both of the Baker's Daughter locations because the Office of Tax and Revenue of DC put a bunch of liens on those properties because he wasn't paying taxes on those businesses going all the way back to 2022. So who else in MAGAville do we know had unpaid taxes, right? And then his other 2 locations are really struggling. They weren't paying taxes either, but then they finally got that all squared away. So they're up and running, but again, their business is hurting. What I wanted people to know, though, is he's got 2 new restaurants in the works. One's a Capitol Hill steakhouse that's going to be called Lucille's Modern Chop House. And it's set to open. So everybody keep an eye on that, because I don't think if you're not into hating people and hating our federal workers, maybe you don't want to give them your business when it opens up. Now, the Mediterranean Wine Bar is also going to be opening, maybe, but it's facing legal troubles because who does this sound like? This chef, Matt Baker, didn't even have a lease agreement signed with the building owner, the landlord. But he went ahead and hired an HVAC contractor to do $213,000 worth of unauthorized HVAC, heating and cooling and ventilation installation work. And then he didn't fucking pay. And so now the HVAC contractor obviously is pulling in the building owner as well. So he's caught up in this legal battle, not paying contractors. Who the hell else in MAGAville does that sound like? A lot of people like to call this fuck around and find out, right? Karma or what have you. Here's how I'm looking at it. The far right, the alt-right, these Christian white nationalists are creating a warped sense of reality. That's how they're pulling people into their cult and keeping them in there. But the thing about living in a warped reality is that facts are still facts. You can lie all you want. You can pretend all you want. You can behave any way you want, living in this alternate reality. But the real reality will come to bite you in the ass. Facts will come to interfere with this facade, this alternate reality you're living in. And this is what happens as a result. That's why authoritarian governments eventually meet their demise, because you can't go around telling people the sky is orange and living like the sky is orange when there's going to be enough people that come in and say, what the fuck, the sky is blue. What's wrong with you? That eventually happens. And that's what's happening with this chef. You know who else is happening too? I just want to share this. So Pete Hegseth, I don't know if you know, but they fired 3 people from the Pentagon because they're being investigated. And the 3 people who are fired, who seemingly are MAGA supporters, are like talking now. They're like, what the fuck? We have no idea what this investigation is about. We did nothing wrong. See, they're fighting amongst each other because the people who run a cult, again, are living in an alternate reality that they're making other people live in. And the facts eventually just are going to come and broadside them. This kind of shit is just going to keep happening with this weird Christian nationalist White House we're being forced to live under. But anyway, lots of fuck around and find out news here.
We have some news right now. The Pope skipped an official meeting with J.D. Vance, sent his deputy instead to lecture Vance on compassion, according to latest reporting from the Daily Beast. The Daily Beast is reporting that Pope Francis skipped the Vatican's official meeting with the vice president and instead sent his number 2. According to the Vatican, an exchange of opinions on the international situation, especially regarding countries affected by war, political tensions, and difficult humanitarian situations, and in particular, attention to migrants, refugees, and prisoners. It called for, quote, serene collaboration between the White House and the Catholic Church, seemingly hinting at tensions that have brewed since Donald Trump took office. Now, the Daily Beast did confirm that Pope Francis and Vice President Vance had a small, private one-on-one meeting in the Pope's residence, but that was not the official meeting between the two, according to the Daily Beast, and instead Vance was lectured by the Pope's number 2. I'll do a full breakdown of this and more on my Substack, link to my bio. As always, follow along, stay up to date on all the news that you need to know about. More to come very soon.
New reporting out by CBS says that Donald Trump is getting ready to start a work group with some of the brightest minds of his administration to help deal with China and negotiate tariffs with them. In this process, he's going to name J.D. Vance the tariff czar. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will be on this commission. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, and the Council of Economic Advisors Chairman Stephen Moran, and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer. It's also likely they're going to add Carolyn Levitt to the work group just to be the PR person that announces all of the breakthroughs that this group makes. Now, I, for one, am going to side with Hal for New York on his interpretation on this, that this is a way for Donald Trump to torpedo all of the potential careers for all of these people because he wants to distance himself from the tariffs. So he's going to put J.D. Vance in charge of it. So that way, if anything goes bad, it's J.D. Vance's fault. It's the same reason he put J.D. Vance in charge of the TikTok deal. If something went bad, hey, look, I saved TikTok. J.D. over here couldn't make a deal. And that's still the route out or the road out for Donald Trump on TikTok. And he's using the same playbook on this tariff stuff with China. So when or if we go into a recession, more likely when than if, but when a recession happens or worse, he can blame J.D. Vance. And as Hal for New York said, this is also the reason that Donald Trump won't give J.D. Vance his endorsement to run after this term is up as president, because he's not sure how much he's going to have to blame J.D. for the things that actually go wrong that are Trump's fault during this administration, because he'll throw J.D. Vance under the bus and back up over him faster than he did Mike Pence. You can be sure about that.
J.D. Vance is like a political chihuahua, barking at everything that moves, thinking he's 10 feet tall when he's really just making a damn fool of himself. Somebody remind him that the vice president is supposed to be seen, not heard, because this isn't the talent show that he thinks it is. So let's make something crystal clear. The vice president's job is not to headline a concert. It's not to run a shadow government. And it sure as hell isn't to run his mouth on every podcast, every news outlet, every conservative event with a microphone. Historically, the vice president had 2 main jobs: break a tie in the Senate and be ready if the president croaks. Simple. That's it. That's the assignment. You're basically supposed to sit quiet in the corner like a substitute teacher with an emergency plan, not jump on the desk and rewrite the whole curriculum because you got bored. And yet, here we are. J.D. Vance is out here barking foreign policy opinions like he's Secretary of State, running his mouth about Civil War scenarios like he's some sort of militia leader, and throwing shade at sitting members of Congress like he's trying to end some sort of Twitter beef. What the fuck is going on? And the wildest part, he's not even good at it. It's giving dollar store Dick Cheney. It's giving I read half a Tom Clancy novel, and now I'm an expert. It's giving I think I'm the president, but nobody told me I'm just the backup generator. The vice president was deliberately designed to be boring. It was supposed to be ceremonial unless absolutely needed. But J.D. Vance treats it like he's the main event. Like Trump's just some sort of temporary inconvenience standing in the way of his spotlight. Historically, even the messy VPs knew how to act. Joe Biden under Obama advised behind closed doors. Kamala Harris under Biden handled assignments, not fan fiction. Hell, even Dan Quayle, who couldn't spell potato, knew to shut up and stay in his lane. J.D. Vance is doing more interviews than the president. He's spitballing national security strategies like it's open mic night. And he's floating ideas that could literally get people killed. And doing it with the smugness of a man who thinks that reading a Reddit thread counts as research. The vice president is supposed to be the spare tire, not the clown strapped to the roof screaming directions. At this point, J.D. Vance is making Dan Quayle look like a statesman. And honestly, that's impressive. In the worst way possible.
Breaking news as Vice President J.D. Vance is visiting the Pope over this Easter weekend, and they got in a tussle over immigration. The Pope asking J.D. Vance to not be a monster. Vance fired back, "Hey, why aren't you wearing a suit, huh? Why can't you have any respect for the Vatican and wear a suit? What is this that you're wearing, huh? What is this, a bathrobe?" So one of the most racist things we saw happen this week with our Vice President, where he said about China that everyone that lives in China are Chinese peasants. That is literally the most racist crap I've ever heard in my entire life. And here's a man who literally has a woman that he's married to that is not from America, that is not white. And yet, this racist MFer will destroy and break down and terrorize Chinese by calling them peasants. Now, let's keep in mind that these people are providing every single piece of clothing that you're even wearing right now. And yet J.D. Vance, with his racist rant, called them peasants. Or he did this because he's looking to escalate a war with people that we were trying to get along with. This administration is the most racist, the most unpatriotic, the most unconstitutional administrations we'll ever see.
So the Pope just gave a giant Catholic middle finger to J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance flew to the Vatican to celebrate Easter and was set to meet with the Pope, and the Pope said, "No, sorry," and sent a deputy to give Vance a lecture about compassion. J.D. Vance met with Cardinal Parolin, which is the Vatican Secretary of State, and they discussed Catholicism in the United States, the plight of persecuted Christians around the world, including Gaza, and whether or not Donald Trump has plans to restore world peace. J.D. Vance naturally threw a bitch fit, according to some outlets, and refused to leave the Vatican unless he was granted a meeting with the 88-year-old Pope, who is recovering from a life-threatening battle with pneumonia. According to British outlet Sky News, Vance was then granted that and was driven to the Pope's residence in Vatican City, where they had a meeting that lasted a total of a few minutes. That's all he got. Strong-arming this 88-year-old man who is in recovery into meeting with you, this man who was too sick still to attend the Good Friday service, is not a very Catholic thing to do at all, actually. To be honest, I'm just surprised that J.D. Vance did not combust into a ball of flames walking into the Vatican, because that man is sent from Lucifer himself. Francis, I get you. If I was the Pope, I wouldn't want to meet with a demon.
In a manner of speaking, the Daily Beast now reports that Pope Francis himself snubbed J.D. and Usha Vance during a trip to Vatican City. The Pope was scheduled to have an in-depth meeting with Vance, who is a recent convert to Catholicism himself, to discuss issues facing the world.
For more.
Donald Trump is about to sabotage J.D. Vance's political career, and I think it's on purpose, as he is about to name J.D. Vance his tariff czar. And the only reason that Donald Trump would name somebody that is so he can assign blame if things go wrong. If there is a recession or a depression, any negative fallout whatsoever, it will 100% land on J.D. Vance. And know that if there's anything good that comes of this, Donald Trump will take full credit. But this is how Donald Trump operates. He is ready and willing, when something good happens, to fully take credit and let the world know, I'm the guy in charge, I make the decisions. But if something bad happens, he becomes an outside observer. He's no longer president and blames those around him. And now it's going to be J.D. Vance for tariffs. And this is also why Donald Trump is not ready to give J.D. Vance his endorsement for 2028 for the president, because he doesn't know how much blame he has to assign to J.D. Vance for the things that go wrong in his presidency. Understand this, J.D. Vance, if this happens, was just thrown under the bus, and he will be the fall guy for everything wrong in Trump's act.
Today.
Imagine being so unlikable that the guy whose job it is to meet people and love everyone doesn't want to meet you. If by some miracle you are that socially unappealing, you might be JD Vance. Because Vice President JD Vance, who's made being a Catholic one of the few defining traits of his personality, was snubbed by Pope Francis this weekend at the Vatican. According to a Vatican statement, he allegedly sent his number 2, a deputy cardinal, to lecture the Vice President on compassion. Imagine being so insufferable that the global head of your own church sends someone to tell you to pack it in. There was an exchange of opinions, which basically means, yeah, there was an argument. There was a disagreement. JD Vance was told by someone from the Vatican that he needs to get his shit together. You need to put that into context and realize that Pope Francis has frequently called Trump and Vance's deportation effort a disgrace and a grave sin. The Pope is calling what you're doing a sin and you're still doing it. Great job, JD. Great, good, really real Catholic stuff. Not to mention that earlier this year, the Pope had to come out and correct, without naming JD Vance, but correct him on his revolting use of medieval Catholic literature to justify mass deportation. I cannot stress this enough. You've got the Pope, who does not weigh in on political issues normally stays apolitical, coming in to tell you to keep Catholicism's name out of your goddamn mouth. The embarrassment would just make me evaporate, personally. I don't know how JD Vance does it. But while Pope Francis is super duper old and also recovering from pneumonia, he was in hospital for a really long time, he was happy to meet with King Charles and Queen Camilla. Met them last week. So if he wanted to meet JD Vance, he could have, but like all of the people in Greenland and most of the people in the world, he did not want to meet JD Vance, and I don't blame him. It's absolutely astounding that we're looking at the first US administration that is quite literally like satanic in nature, according to the Vatican, essentially. I'm personally not so in touch with my faith, but if the Pope excommunicates JD Vance, I'll consider it. I'll consider it. Follow.
Hey Trump supporters, I hope this video gets to you, but I don't know that it will because it's, FYP. But I have something I want you to consider for your own safety. And I'm being very genuine when I say this. When you guys are cheering on Trump with this not needing due process, the concern I have about that and what I want you to consider is if that's something that becomes commonplace, that could be easily flipped on you. And I'll tell you why. One, if you think the people on the left are this deep state evil, whatever you think they are, if they were to come into power, because no leader, even if they're a dictator, they don't stay in power forever. That doesn't happen. So let's say the next president or whoever comes in, and they deem that people that voted for him, maybe January 6 people, MAGA in general, maybe they deem them having been a violent gang, something like that. And say, you know what, I just want to round them up and deport them. I want to send them up to El Salvador or wherever it is. And there would be no due process required because that has become the norm. It's accepted. So they could literally pick you up and deport you, and you wouldn't get your day in court. You wouldn't get to say anything. Maybe they'd show up in masks like these bounty hunters are doing, and there'd be 5 of them, and they'd just snatch you up. And you'd say, what's going on? Say, I'm just here for the government. And then put you on a plane and send you off. That could happen, especially if you believe the next leader from the left would be this demonic person that you think they are, which is fine, that's your beliefs. But then put that into some logic. They could come in and, if they want retribution or vengeance the way you think they do, they could come after you and use the precedence of there being no due process. And they could say, well, that's what Trump did. That's what you guys said was okay. So that's the new, common law now. We just all agreed on it somehow. And the other thing is, with even Trump being in there now, some of you are getting frustrated that there haven't been mass arrests like on Nancy Pelosi or Adam Schiff or the different things that you think you've heard about, on the left. And, Trump said there was going to be mass arrests, and Kash Patel said there's going to be mass arrests. And a lot of you are getting angry that hasn't happened. Like you're feeling kind of conned. If you get loud enough about that, Trump could get really angry because he does not like being criticized. You may think he handles that well. He doesn't. That's why he fires so many people. So if you guys get really loud about that, maybe he deems you a homegrown problem, right? Because he can pick up people that are homegrown now. That's his plan. You could be disappeared so that you can't be on the internet saying he didn't live up to his promises, he's a fake. Because that is starting to happen online. People are seeing that. If you don't think he's not seeing it, and the other government officials aren't seeing it, they are. But they aren't going to look at that as supporting them. They're going to look at that like a threat. So I hope that you guys really kind of think out how this could blow back on you, because it absolutely could. Whether that's because you think the next person from the left would do that, or the one in office right now could do that. So please think through laws and why they exist to keep people safe, and why just saying, I'm just going to grab up homegrown people that do bad things. That's a very loose definition. It's not even a lawful definition. So for your own sake, be careful. And I'm not going to let comments be on here because I don't want either side yelling, screaming, fighting. This is just an actual warning and something I hope you will think about.
Donald Trump must be so embarrassed with all the things that he has not achieved so far. He has promised so much before he became the president and has not delivered on any of those promises so far. These are my top 5 of things where he must be really embarrassed. On the 5th place, he promised peace in Ukraine within 24 days after starting his presidency. How did he do that? Well, he basically wanted to give everything Russia wanted, and on top of that, take all the minerals that Ukraine has to the advantage of the US. Of course, we know that that's never going to work. On top of that, there was like an awful situation in the Oval Office, and he just couldn't get it done. There's no peace there. On the 4th place, Greenland, Canada. Trump was thinking he was doing the people of Greenland and Canada a favor by saying that they will be part of the US soon. To his big surprise, really no one in Canada or Greenland wanted to join the US. Didn't he see that coming? People do not like you, Mr. Trump. Number 3, threatening tariffs to all his allies. And then, when they retaliate, have their tariffs of their own, having to postpone them or cancel them at all, even before they are being introduced. That must be an embarrassment. Number 2, claim that he will be bringing back jobs to the US. So far, not a lot of companies have increased their production inside the US, and even Boeing is now saying that they have to move their production outside of the US because, China does not want Boeing flights anymore. Most of Boeing's flights, 80% of them, planes, go outside of the US. They are hit with tariffs also from the opposite side. So more jobs are going to leave the US than that they are coming in. Before I get to the first embarrassment of Trump, please do follow me and like my videos because that helps me a lot. And then number 1, the drums are sounding in the background. The China trade war situation where Trump was increasing tariffs after tariff. China was doing the same. Then Trump had to pull out and exempt laptops, phones, and chips because he had to acknowledge that he needed them more than China needs to sell them to them. On top of that, the tariffs from China to the US are still there. China does not want to negotiate with Trump. Trump is waiting for China to call him, but they will never.
These were my top 5. I'm curious about yours. Leave a comment and tell me which one I did miss.
Well. It appears that Dementia Don has once again started sundowning, friends. Only this time he is sundowning at sunrise. Yes, honey, I could not believe my eyes or my ears, baby. Because this man got up there today and couldn't remember the name of the White House. Yes. He went on a little rant about how that little mail-order maiden Melania had done some redecorating for Easter. He says this house, this building, it's tippy-top. He said we call this the tippy-top shape place. I don't know about tippy-top shape, but it damn sure needs to, I don't know, tippy-topple on over. Anyway. Woo. I don't want to hear another person say anything about no Sleepy Joe. After all, Daddy doesn't even know where he is, honey. The tippy-toppy place.
There was a heated argument today at the Vatican between J.D. Vance and the Pope's second in charge. J.D. Vance was in Rome today, where he did meet with the Pope just extremely briefly before then meeting with the Pope's second in charge, in which we're being told here there was an exchange of opinions on a number of sensitive issues, including international conflicts, migrants, and prisoners. The Pope has many times spoken out about the Trump administration and their mass deportations that they're doing here in the United States. And it turns out that Pope's number 2 lectured J.D. Vance about all of those topics. What's funny, by the way, J.D. Vance's official statement about their meeting had nothing about this. What's interesting is that J.D. Vance actually acknowledged all of the Pope's sayings that he said to him in the past, because we did see the Pope kind of ridicule J.D. Vance not too long ago, in which Vance at that point did call himself a baby Catholic and acknowledged that there are things about the faith I still don't know yet. For those who don't know, he actually became Catholic, I believe, in 2019. That's pretty recent. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Please share and repost my videos and follow me for more.
So the Pope just gave a giant Catholic middle finger to J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance flew to the Vatican to celebrate Easter and was set to meet with the Pope, and the Pope said no, sorry, and sent a deputy to give Vance a lecture about compassion. J.D. Vance met with Cardinal Parolin, which is the Vatican Secretary of State, and they discussed Catholicism in the United States, the plight of persecuted Christians around the world, including Gaza, and whether or not Donald Trump has plans to restore world peace. J.D. Vance naturally threw a bitch fit, according to some outlets, and refused to leave the Vatican unless he was granted a meeting with the 88-year-old Pope, who is recovering from a life-threatening battle with pneumonia. According to British outlet Sky News, Vance was then granted that and was driven to the Pope's residence in Vatican City, where they had a meeting that lasted a total of a few minutes. That's all he got. Strong-arming this 88-year-old man who is in recovery into meeting with you, this man who was too sick still to attend the Good Friday service, is not a very Catholic thing to do at all, actually. To be honest, I'm just surprised that J.D. Vance did not combust into a ball of flames walking into the Vatican, because that man is sent from Lucifer himself. Francis, I get you. If I was the Pope, I wouldn't want to meet with a demon.
Jesus may have risen on Easter Sunday, but the same cannot be said of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's approval ratings. And now the Pope just delivered a massive, unpleasant Easter surprise. Welcome to Occupy Democrats. I'm David Reddish. Conventional wisdom holds that Christian conservatives are a core base of the Republican Party. Starting with Ronald Reagan, the moral majority helped Republicans take over the White House, not to mention the judiciary and legislative branches. That has changed. Remember this moment from January, just after Trump and Vance arrived in the White House?
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land.
That footage still makes my heart swell. Bishop Marianne Buttle, who you just saw in that clip, she largely exemplifies the reason the Republican Party has fallen out of favor with conservative Christians. No wonder the Pope is now throwing shade. Stay tuned. The schism between the Republican Party and conservative Christians really began around 2008. Not only did Democrats such as Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton become more open in discussing their faith, but Republicans looked like total hypocrites. Newt Gingrich preached about monogamy while carrying on numerous affairs and an open marriage. In Congress, Tom DeLay reveled in money laundering, while House Speaker Dennis Hastert was outed as a pedophile. These events also coincided with a cry for women to have control over their reproductive systems and enjoy equal pay, and for LGBT people to have equality under the law. And all of this says nothing of serial philanderer Donald Trump, his rape of women, his divorces, his hush money. That list goes on. There's obviously a lot more I could say on this subject, but that's another report for another time. For the moment, let's talk about Easter, the holiest of Christian holidays, and the Pope. Pope Francis has long advocated for more empathy and tolerance among Christians, and he's advocated for holding politicians to a moral standard outside their love of tax cuts and lip service to Christians. That could explain the Holy Father extending a middle finger